It was the way she laughed that night. Too loud, too carefree. It grated against my nerves like sandpaper on raw skin. Lila was perched at the edge of our worn leather couch, scrolling through her phone with an excitement she hadn't shown in months. Not for me, anyway. "Greg's picking me up in 20, she said, not bothering to look at me. Her tone was detached, like she was announcing a weather report. I stared at her from the kitchen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. "You really think this is okay? What's that supposed to mean?" She set her phone down, finally meeting my gaze, her brows arched in mock confusion. "You know what it means," I replied, my voice low. "This, whatever the hell you and Greg are doing, it's not okay." Her lips curled into a smirk, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, Nick, don't act so innocent. We've been broken for years. I'm just the one brave enough to admit it." Brave. That's what she called sneaking around with another man, vanishing into the night like a thief, and leaving me to piece together the scraps of our life. "So, what is this then?" I gestured to her sparkling gold dress, the one I'd bought her 2 anniversaries ago. "You playing house with Greg now?" She sighed, exasperated. "It's just a party. A swingers party, okay? No strings, no commitments. Just adults having fun. You wouldn't understand." And there it was again. That patronizing tone, like I was some naive schoolboy who couldn't comprehend the freedom she craved. I clenched my fists, swallowing the rage that threatened to spill out. "Don't bother coming back," I said finally, my voice shaking. "If you walk out that door, we're done." Her smirk widened into a full-blown grin as if I'd just told her she'd won the lottery. "Oh, Nick, don't make this so dramatic. You'll thank me someday." And with that, she grabbed her clutch, swayed to the door, and disappeared into the night. 3 days passed, 3 days of silence. At first, I was too angry to care. Let her have her little fling, I told myself. But by the second night, when her clothes remained untouched in the closet and her phone went straight to voicemail, I started to feel the gnawing bite of uncertainty. By the third morning, I was done waiting. I called a lawyer, filed for divorce, and resolved to move on. Whatever she wanted to find in Greg's arms or at that damn party, she could have it. But 2 weeks later, the silence broke. The call came just after 8 a.m., while I was nursing a bitter cup of coffee and scrolling through emails I didn't care about. "Mr. Reynolds?" The voice on the other end was clipped, professional. "This is Detective Howard from the Fairfax County Police Department. Do you have a moment to talk about your wife, Lila Reynolds?" Ex-wife, I thought, but kept it to myself. "What's this about?" "We believe your wife may be a victim of foul play. Her last known location was at a private residence in Rockford." My chest tightened. "Foul play? What the hell are you talking about?" There was a pause, the kind that makes your blood run cold. "She attended a private event on the evening of October 14th. We have reason to believe she never left the property." My mind raced. The party. The one she'd left with Greg for. "Greg," I said aloud. "She was with a guy named Greg." "We're aware of Mr. McAllister," the detective replied. "He's currently under investigation as well. Mr. Reynolds, we'd like you to come down to the station to answer some questions." I arrived at the precinct an hour later, my head spinning with possibilities. Detective Howard greeted me in a stark gray interview room, his expression grim. He slid a photo across the table, a sprawling mansion with high gates and manicured hedges. "This is the property where the party took place," he said. "It's owned by a man named Victor Kane. Have you heard of him?" I shook my head. The name meant nothing to me. Howard leaned forward. "Victor Kane is well known in certain circles, wealthy, influential, and notorious for hosting unconventional events." "What do you mean by unconventional?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Sex parties. But more than that, events with darker themes, rumors of violence, coercion, even human trafficking." The room spun. "And you think Lila?" Howard's eyes locked onto mine, unflinching. "We've recovered footage from the party. It shows your wife entering the property, but there's no record of her leaving." My stomach churned, a sickening cocktail of anger, fear, and something darker I couldn't name. "What the hell happened to her?" Howard didn't answer. Instead, he slid another photo across the table. It was a grainy still from a security camera. Lila, in her gold dress, walking through a grand foyer. Behind her, a man I assumed was Greg. But it was the third figure that made my blood run cold. A shadowy silhouette, watching her from the edge of the frame. "Who's that?" I asked. Howard's face darkened. "We don't know. But whoever it is, we believe they're responsible for what happened next." "What happened next?" I demanded, my voice rising. Howard met my gaze, his expression haunted. "That's what we're trying to find out." The drive to the mansion felt like stepping into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. After the meeting with Detective Howard, I'd left the station burning with questions. And something else. Rage. They didn't have enough evidence to get a warrant, they said. The surveillance footage was inconclusive. The mansion, with its sprawling estate and high walls, was protected by layers of legal bureaucracy. But I didn't need permission. I'd spent the past 3 days combing through Lila's social media accounts, digging into every scrap of information I could find about this Victor Kane and his infamous parties. Most of it was vague, whispered rumors on forums and chat groups, drugs, blackmail. Some said he was untouchable, his wealth insulating him from justice. I wasn't interested in justice. When I reached the estate that night, the gates loomed ahead like the jaws of a steel beast. There were no guards in sight, but cameras dotted the perimeter. I parked my car down the road and scaled the fence, my heart pounding. The grounds were eerily silent, the kind of quiet that presses on your ears. The mansion stood in the center, its windows glowing faintly like the eyes of a predator, watching me approach. I moved quickly, keeping to the shadows. Lila's face burned in my mind, her smirk that night before she left, her gold dress shimmering like fire. Anger pushed me forward, silencing the whispers of doubt. I slipped in through a side entrance, the door left ajar. Inside, the air was heavy with the sickly sweet scent of perfume and something metallic. The grand foyer stretched before me, its marble floors reflecting the dim light from a chandelier. It was too quiet. No voices, no music, just the faint hum of electricity. I crept down a corridor, past a series of closed doors. Then I heard it. Muffled voices, low and tense. I pressed myself against a wall, straining to listen. "She shouldn't have fought back," a man said, his voice sharp with irritation. "Victor doesn't tolerate defiance." "She's not the first," another replied. "He'll deal with her like he did the others." My fists clenched, the rage boiling over. The room they were in was a study, its double doors slightly ajar. I peeked inside. 2 men stood near a desk, their suits immaculate, their postures relaxed. Between them was a monitor displaying a grainy video feed of a basement. And there she was. Lila. She was slumped against a wall, her dress torn, her face bruised and pale. My breath caught in my throat, a mix of fury and helplessness. "Victor wants her gone by morning," one of the men said. "No loose ends." Something inside me snapped. I burst into the room before I could think, a fire extinguisher I'd grabbed from the hall in my hands. The first man turned, his eyes wide with surprise, but he didn't have time to react. The extinguisher connected with his face with a sickening crunch, and he crumpled to the floor. The second man lunged at me, drawing a knife from his belt. I swung again, but he ducked, the blade slicing through my shirt and grazing my side. Pain flared, but I didn't stop. I dropped the extinguisher and tackled him, slamming him into the desk. The monitor crashed to the floor, the image of Lila flickering out. "Who the hell are you?" The man spat, struggling against my grip. "Her husband," I growled, slamming his head into the desk. He went limp, his body sliding to the floor. I didn't have time to waste. Grabbing the knife, I sprinted down the corridor, following the faint hum of machinery. If the video feed was real, there had to be a way to the basement. I found the door at the end of a narrow staircase, its lock rusted and fragile. The knife was useless, but a nearby fire axe did the trick. The door splintered under the blows, and I stepped into a cavernous underground space that reeked of mildew and despair. Rows of cages lined the walls, most empty. But in the far corner, I saw her. "Lila!" I shouted, rushing to her side. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Nick," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, it's me," I said, cutting through the chains that bound her wrists. "We're getting out of here." But as I helped her to her feet, The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the stairs. Victor Kane. He emerged from the shadows, his presence cold and commanding. Two more men flanked him, their expressions stone-like, their weapons drawn. "You must be Nick," Victor said, his voice smooth as silk. "I've heard so much about you." "You're going to let us go," I said, brandishing the knife. Victor chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." His men moved first. The fight was brutal and chaotic. One of them lunged at me, but I sidestepped, driving the knife into his side. He screamed, falling to the ground. The other swung a baton, catching me in the ribs. Pain exploded, but adrenaline kept me moving. I grabbed his arm, twisting until I heard a snap, and he howled in agony. Victor watched it all, his expression calm, almost amused. When it was over, I stood panting, blood dripping from my hands. Victor clapped slowly, his smile predatory. "Impressive, but this changes nothing." I raised the knife, but before I could move, a sharp pain shot through my neck. Everything blurred. A needle. Victor stepped closer as darkness closed in. "Good night, Nick." When I woke, the world was spinning. Lila was gone. And I was back in my car, parked outside my house. The knife was gone, my clothes were clean. There was no sign of the blood, the fight, nothing. Victor's voice echoed in my mind. "This changes nothing." But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The message came 3 days after I woke in my car, as if Victor Kane was mocking me. A sleek black envelope slipped under my front door, embossed with a golden K. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words typed in a crisp serif font. "Forget her. Forget this. You live or you burn." It wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. I spent the rest of that day drinking whiskey, staring at the note until the letters blurred together. By midnight, the fear had burned away, replaced by something colder, sharper. They thought they could erase Lila, wipe her out of existence like she was nothing. They thought they could scare me into silence. They were wrong. I spent the next week preparing, using every resource I could scrounge. Kane thought his wealth made him invincible, that his power rendered him untouchable. But I had something he didn't. A life already ruined, nothing left to lose. Step 1. Cut off the Hydra's heads. Victor Kane wasn't just a man, he was a network, a web of connections, favors, and dependencies. I tracked down the names associated with his events, from property managers to security firms. A few well-placed bribes and anonymous calls to federal agencies started the unraveling. His offshore accounts, frozen, his front companies, flagged for investigation, his partners, panicking. It was a subtle start, enough to make him uncomfortable, but not enough to tip him off that it was me. Step 2, hit him where it hurts. The mansion was Kane's pride, a fortress that hosted his depravity, but even fortresses had weaknesses. I'd noticed the backup generators during my brief visit, tucked into an outdoor utility shed. If those went offline, so did his security system. I returned to the estate under the cover of darkness, armed with a homemade EMP device and enough fuel to make it burn. The plan was simple. Fry the electronics, torch the place, and send Kane a message he couldn't ignore. The EMP worked like a charm. The mansion plunged into darkness, alarms silenced, cameras useless. I crept through the grounds, planting gasoline-soaked rags at strategic points. As the flames erupted, I felt a sick satisfaction. The mansion glowed against the night sky, its grandeur reduced to ash. But this was only the beginning. Step 3. The Hammer Falls Kane retaliated, of course. I expected it. He sent 2 men to talk to me, a polite euphemism for a beating that would leave most men broken. But I wasn't most men anymore. When they cornered me in my driveway, I was ready. The first went down with a crowbar to the knee, his scream echoing in the night. The second got a face full of pepper spray before I slammed his head against the pavement. I left one alive, just barely, with a message for Kane. "You're next." Step 4. The final play. The thing about men like Kane is they never expect someone to take the fight to their doorstep. I learned everything I could about his schedule, his habits, and his weaknesses. It all led to a private yacht moored at a secluded marina, a floating palace where he conducted his most secret dealings. Breaking onto the yacht was easier than I expected. His guards were more interested in partying with the guests than watching for intruders. I slipped aboard unnoticed, a duffel bag full of homemade explosives slung over my shoulder. In the lower deck, I found the control room, where the ship's systems were managed. It took me less than 5 minutes to wire the explosives, setting a timer for 20 minutes. As I made my way to the upper deck, I heard voices, Kane's unmistakable baritone among them. I couldn't resist. I stepped into the lounge, and there he was, lounging on a white leather couch, surrounded by sycophants and champagne. Nick? His smile was pure venom. I've been expecting you. The room went silent as the guests turned to stare. Victor, I said, my voice steady, you've taken everything from me. It's only fair I return the favor. His smile faltered for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. You think you can stop me? You're nothing. I stepped closer, pulling out the detonator I'd rigged to the explosives. I don't have to stop you. I just have to sink you. Panic rippled through the room as the guests realized what was happening. Kane rose to his feet, his composure cracking. You're bluffing, he said, his voice shaking. I pressed the button. The explosion ripped through the yacht, splitting it in half as flames erupted into the night sky. I dove into the water just before the blast, the shockwave propelling me forward. I swam to shore, my lungs burning, the sounds of screams and chaos fading behind me. As I climbed onto the rocky beach, I turned back to watch the inferno. Kane's empire was sinking, both literally and figuratively. Epilogue. They never found his body. Maybe he drowned, maybe he didn't. It didn't matter. His mansion was gone, his yacht was gone, and his empire was in ruins. As for Lila, I never got closure. I searched the ruins of the mansion, dug through the aftermath, but she was gone too. Maybe she was dead. Maybe she'd escaped. I'll never know. But for the first time in years, I felt free. The satisfaction of Kane's destruction was fleeting. Even as his empire crumbled, the scars he'd left behind refused to heal. Lila's disappearance haunted me, but worse was the hollow realization that her family, people who had once felt like my own, had no idea what had happened to her. I told myself they deserved the truth, no matter how much it hurt. But when I drove to her parents' house, it wasn't grief or shock that greeted me, it was contempt. Nick, Lila's mother, Marjorie, said coldly, her hand gripping the edge of the door like she might slam it in my face. Haven't you done enough? I blinked, taken aback. What are you talking about? You let her walk into that nightmare, she spat, her eyes flashing with anger. You let her fall in with those people. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Marjorie, she made her choices. I tried to stop her, but Don't, she snapped, cutting me off. You think we don't know what kind of man you are? Always controlling, always pushing her away. If she's gone, it's because you drove her to it. Her words hit like a slap. I wanted to argue, to scream that she didn't know the half of it, but the venom in her tone froze the words in my throat. She's gone, I said finally, my voice trembling. And you're blaming me? She's gone because of you, she hissed, slamming the door in my face. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, Marjorie's words replaying in my head. Maybe she was right. Maybe I could have done more, been better. But as the doubts gnawed at me, another thought took hold. What if they knew more than they were letting on? It wasn't paranoia, it was a gut feeling. Lila's family had always been close-knit, almost suffocatingly so. If anyone had insight into the world she'd been drawn into, it was them. And if they weren't going to help me willingly, I'd find out another way. Step 1. Digging into the past. Marjorie and her husband Thomas had always presented themselves as upstanding, church-going people. But as I dug into their lives, I uncovered a darker undercurrent. Marjorie had ties to a local charity that had quietly shut down after allegations of embezzlement. Thomas had a gambling habit that had nearly cost them their home. They weren't as clean as they pretended to be. But the real breakthrough came when I hacked into Lila's old email account, something I'd promised myself I'd never do. Buried among the mundane messages was a chain from her sister, Vanessa. Be careful with Victor, one message read. Mom and Dad don't like you getting involved with him. He's dangerous. Mom and Dad. They knew. Step 2. Cornering Vanessa. I found Vanessa at her boutique downtown, arranging overpriced scarves in the display window. She looked startled to see me, but quickly masked it with a strained smile. Nick, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. How are you holding up? Cut the crap, I said, stepping closer. You knew about Victor Kane. Your parents knew. And none of you warned me. Her face paled. I don't know what you're talking about. I grabbed her wrist, leaning in so no one could overhear. Don't lie to me, Vanessa. Lila's gone because of him. And if you don't start talking, I'll make sure the police start looking into all of you. Her facade cracked. All right. Just let go. I released her and she rubbed her wrist, glaring at me. We didn't say anything because we didn't want to get involved. Victor, he has people everywhere. Powerful people. Mom and Dad were terrified. Terrified of what? She hesitated, then lowered her voice. Of what he'd do to us if we crossed him. Lila thought she could handle him, but when she started talking about leaving, my stomach turned. Leaving? Vanessa nodded, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She wanted out. She said she'd seen things, horrible things. But Victor doesn't let people walk away. Why didn't you go to the police? I asked, my voice rising. She shook her head. You don't understand. Victor had leverage on all of us. If we talked, he'd ruin us. Step 3. The family's price. Vanessa's confession gave me enough leverage to turn the screws on Marjorie and Thomas. I started small, leaking details of their shady pasts to local reporters. When the stories hit the news, they panicked, scrambling to contain the damage. Then, I sent an anonymous tip to the IRS about Thomas's gambling debts and undeclared income. A few days later, agents showed up at their house with subpoenas. The final blow came when I sent Marjorie a copy of Vanessa's email chain, along with a simple note, tell the truth, or this goes public. Step 4. The confrontation. Marjorie called me that night, her voice trembling. What do you want from us? She asked. The truth, I said. What happened to Lila? There was a long pause, then a broken sigh. She's dead, Marjorie whispered. Victor killed her. I closed my eyes, the words hitting me like a freight train. And you did nothing? We couldn't, she cried. He said if we went to the police, he'd kill us too. He showed us pictures, videos. He has people everywhere. We were just trying to survive. I hung up, disgusted. They might have been scared, but their cowardice had cost Lila her life. Step 5. The endgame. Marjorie and Thomas thought the worst was over, but I wasn't done. They'd betrayed Lila, abandoned her to a monster, and I wasn't going to let them escape unscathed. I leaked everything. Their involvement with Victor, their silence about Lila's death, their financial crimes. Within weeks, their lives were in ruins. The community turned against them. Their house was seized. They were pariahs. Vanessa skipped town, but I tracked her down too, making sure she knew she wasn't safe from the truth. When it was all over, I stood outside the ruins of their lives, feeling nothing but emptiness. Lila was gone, and no amount of revenge would bring her back. But at least they'd finally paid the price for their cowardice. After dismantling Victor Kane's empire and ruining Lila's family, I thought the fire inside me would finally burn out. I thought I'd find some measure of peace, but there was none. The hole Lila had left was too deep, and the truths I'd uncovered too ugly to let go. Victor Kane might have been destroyed, but his shadow lingered, and there was one final thread to pull. The video. The day it all came together started with a package on my doorstep. No return address. Just a plain manila envelope with a USB drive inside. My instincts screamed that it was a trap, but I couldn't ignore it. I plugged it into my laptop, the screen flickering to life with a grainy video. Lila. She was in a dimly lit room, the same basement I'd seen on Victor's monitor. Her face was pale, her lips trembling as she spoke. If you're seeing this, she said, then I didn't make it out. My heart stopped. They're going to kill me, she continued, tears streaming down her face. Because I know too much. I thought I could handle it, but I was wrong. Victor, he's worse than I ever imagined. He uses people, breaks them, and when they're no longer useful, she trailed off, staring into the camera with haunted eyes. Nick, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I was so angry at you, at us, that I didn't see what I was walking into. I thought I needed freedom, but all I found was hell. I love you. I always did. Please, make sure he pays. The screen went black. The return of Kane. The video shattered something in me, but it also gave me a renewed purpose. Victor Kane wasn't dead. I'd destroyed his empire, but I hadn't killed the man. That had to change. It took months to track him down. Victor had gone underground, hiding behind layers of fake identities and offshore accounts. But desperation makes people careless, and I found him in a crumbling villa on the outskirts of Cartagena, Colombia. He was living like a ghost, surrounded by a skeleton crew of loyal enforcers. I wasn't the same man who had gone up against him before. This time, I came armed to the teeth. A Glock, a combat knife, and enough explosives to turn his hideout into rubble. The final confrontation. I breached the villa just before dawn, taking out his guards with brutal efficiency. The training videos I'd watched on close quarters, combat had paid off. Each step brought me closer to him, each bullet a punctuation mark in my rage. I found Victor in a study, hunched over a desk cluttered with maps and documents. When he saw me, his face twisted into a mix of fear and anger. Nick, he said, standing slowly, you're persistent, I'll give you that. But you've already lost. Lila's gone. What more do you want? I raised the gun, aiming it squarely at his chest. Her justice, and your life. He smirked, that familiar arrogance returning. You think killing me will change anything? I'm just one man. There will always be more like me. Maybe, I said, stepping closer. But there won't be you. He lunged at me, faster than I expected. We crashed to the ground, the gun skidding out of reach. His fists were brutal, slamming into my ribs and face, but I fought back, driving my elbow into his throat. We struggled, the fight messy and desperate, until I managed to grab the knife strapped to my belt. With a roar, I plunged it into his side, the blade sinking deep. Victor gasped, his eyes wide with shock. This is for her, I growled, twisting the knife. The detonation. As Victor bled out on the floor, I activated the timer on the explosives I'd planted around the villa. I left him there, his gasps echoing behind me as I made my way to the edge of the property. The explosion lit up the dawn, a fiery bloom that consumed everything he had built. Epilogue. The fallout. I returned home a different man, my vengeance complete, but my soul in ruins. There was no one left to hurt, no more enemies to destroy. The police eventually ruled Lila's case unsolvable, and the world moved on. Her parents disappeared, their shame too great to bear. Vanessa's trail went cold. As for me, I lived in the quiet aftermath, haunted by the ghosts of what I'd lost and what I'd done. But I carried one thing with me, a single image from the video frozen in my mind. Lila looking into the camera, her final words echoing in my heart. Make sure he pays. And I had.